Well, welcome back to the Always Free show. This is the number one podcast or show for true financial empowerment and true wealth creation without all the BS. And today, you got a special guest, Matt Zarb-Cousin. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks very much for having me. Great to be here. Great setup as well.
Thanks. Yeah, we've put a lot of effort into this studio and it's a comfortable one.
Yeah.
So I like a sofa. So
Yeah,
what do you think?
Yeah, very, very nice. Yeah. And lovely gaff as well. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Looking out onto
You're
the old farm.
not. So we know you're a real person. With real wealth.
I have not hired this. There was no Lambo on my drive. In fact, there's a skip on my drive. That's about as glamorous as it gets. But great guest to have on this show, guys, because you've obviously, if you've been listening to this podcast or watched any of my stuff for the last however many years, you'll know it's all about truth, transparency, realism, realistic expectations, and warning people away from all the BS and the detrimental effects that the wrong approach can have on your life, your finances, your relationships, and your wealth, your chances of ever becoming financially free. So Matt runs a company called Gamban, and I'm going to let Matt tell you a little bit about that as we do a bit of an introduction. But we've got a really great discussion ahead around gambling mentality, what it is, the side effects of that, the effects that it can have on your life, why people do it, so really, really powerful conversation, and it will hit home, I'm sure, for a lot of people that have tried their hand in the markets or buying some NFT bullshit or crypto, all that kind of stuff. So, Matt, first of all, why did you... I always love the origin story. Why did you get into this? Because I kind of feel that there's always a passion behind these types of projects.
Yeah, well, by accident, really, because I got addicted to gambling when I was younger. So when I was 16, I went into a betting shop and gambled on fixed odds betting terminals, which are machines where you used to be able to bet £100 every 20 seconds on roulette.
Wow.
And they were very, very addictive. I got addicted to them very quickly. I had an early big win, which kind of distorted my perceptions of gambling. And then
dangerous when you have a big win, right? Because you
Exactly.
can become cocky and that's it.
Exactly. Completely, skews your perception of, your chance of winning. And you start to believe the myths that, you can actually make money doing this and all this sort of stuff. You start to believe that.
No one can tell you you're wrong.
Exactly.
Because it's like, well, I'm not going to listen to you. I've just made a load of money, right?
Exactly, yeah. And then from then on, when you start losing, you believe you can win it back, and so you chase. And I got into a cycle of loss chasing, and that was something that went on for about 4 years. And even when I would have wins, I would always chase the money I'd already lost previously.
Right.
So you end up in a situation where no amount of money is enough. And even if you won it back, you would be addicted to gambling. You would be addicted to the action, and you would believe that you would convince yourself you could make more money doing it. So the only way to actually win is to stop. And I learned that lesson the hard way. I got into a huge amount of debt. And by the time I was 20, I was in thousands of pounds of debt. I was about £20,000 down. I'd maxed out several overdrafts, loans, student loans, all the money I had and had access to, and even possessions I had and I'd sold online to fund gambling. So it got me into a very, very bad place. And I was very close to taking my own life, and thankfully that didn't happen. And I got into treatment, and it took me about 6 months from then to quit. I had a couple of relapses, but by the time I was 20, I quit, and it took me a few years to repair my finances in terms of, getting back to zero, like repaying all the debts and all that sort of stuff. But the residual impact on my mental health was far greater. And one of the things I realized in recovery was I didn't need a lot of money to live. I didn't need a lot of money just to, this is another thing that you delude yourself about when you're a gambling addict, because you try to rationalize gambling because you're addicted to it and you want to do it, is you tell yourself that you need all of this money. You need thousands and thousands of pounds. Otherwise, how are you going to get by and all this sort of stuff?
You try and back your emotions up with logic, like
Exactly.
with some kind of logical explanation.
Exactly right. Yeah. It's in recovery. The best way of understanding addiction is it's something that talks to you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have an urge to do something that is irrational, the addiction will try to rationalize that, and it will tell you stories about that, and you believe those stories until you realize what's happening. What's happening is the addiction is trying to get you to do something that isn't in your interest.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned loss chasing. We call that revenge trading, where it's like, oh, you know, if I'd been in that, I would have earned this much, and you keep telling yourself, I would have had this much, and that shoulda, woulda, coulda makes you want to, you know, bet more, and you kind of beat yourself up. You basically, you know, bring yourself down because you're beating yourself up for something that's completely unrealistic. So revenge trading is really, really dangerous, and that's same as loss chasing.
Yeah.
What's the, you know, what did it take for you to turn that around? You know, I know you said you realised that you didn't need much money, but what were the steps you took? Because obviously you run Gamban now, which we'll talk about in a moment, but
Sure.
That wasn't there. So what did you do to peel yourself away from it?
I tried to help other people, and I think that for me, I think it was almost because I'd sort of given up on myself a little bit,
Right?
And I just thought I'll just put everything into helping others, and I looked for the most efficient way of doing that, and it was changing policy, campaigning to change the law, and I got involved with a campaign to reduce the stake on fixed odds betting terminals from £100 down to £2 a spin, and we were successful with that campaign, and it took about 7 years. So, you know, tenacity and determination and, you know, persistence paid off there. But in the meantime, I saw what was happening with smartphones. Smartphones have changed the game with everything, and with online gambling in particular. And we started regulating online gambling in Britain in 2014, so as late as that. But by that point, smartphones had become quite ubiquitous. And I saw what was happening, and I just thought, imagine if I had a fixed odds betting terminal in my pocket. That would have been a nightmare. I would never have been able to quit. So I looked at what was out there in terms of blocking gambling, and to be honest, the solutions weren't great, and I thought we could do better. And I met my business partner, Jack Simmons, and he had started developing a prototype for how we could block gambling on Mac, which wasn't available at the time on any platform. So we got investment, and we developed a prototype for every platform. And 8 years on, we're now in a position where we have 75,000 active users, and we're in several countries, and we're working with regulators, and it's grown a lot. And the logic for that was, if people are addicted and they want to quit and opt out of gambling in an environment where smartphones have made everything much more accessible, then they should be able to do that. They should have that option. Yeah. And that's something I really firmly believe in. So yeah, I think It's working.
Amazing. I'll talk about Gamban. There's a couple of questions I got around Gamban in a moment, but as far as gambling goes, I'd love your take on this, but I've always been of the opinion that there is kind of a misconception around how the word gambling is used, because I've just been back from Vegas, right? And I went into the casino, and there are gamblers everywhere, right? And when I say gamblers, there's lots of people trying their hand at the one-arm bandit and having a bit of fun, and, you know, doing the blackjack table, roulette table, all the rest of it, right? But when you look over at like the winning tournament table for the poker, every night on that semi-final, you know, quarter final, it's the same people every night, right? So there's a fundamental difference between the people on the floor and the people on that table, and it's the approach, right? You can choose to approach it as a gambler, or you choose to approach it as a professional with a plan of consistency to beat the house, right? And depending on what one you take will result in you either making some money consistently over a period of time, or just losing money because the house always wins. So gambling, in my opinion, is the approach. which then causes an addiction if you take the wrong approach, or can do. What I'd love to know is where do you change over from having some fun to it being an addiction?
Yeah. So I think that...
And what you think about what I just said.
Yeah, I think it's a bit more than the approach. I think it's the product as well that you're engaging with. Because if you think about player versus player poker, you can, in theory, that is a game of skill, and you can, in theory, if you get an edge over your opponents, make money in the long run as a professional poker player. There are lots of them.
Yeah.
In fact, I work for one at the moment. He's a philanthropist now. He funds a lot of the... Sorry?
Casper Berry?
No, Derek Webb.
Oh, okay.
He actually, so he's a great example because he was a poker player, and as I say, like now he's a philanthropist. He funds gambling reform campaigns, but he also invented 3-card poker, which is a casino game.
Right.
One of the the most successful proprietary casino table game ever, because obviously no one has the rights to roulette or blackjack. So that's like number 3, and you cannot make money on table games long term. So the more you play on table games, the more you will lose over time. So that's a bad investment if you're trying to make money. Playing poker is slightly different, but you're right in the sense that you can play poker in all sorts of different ways. You could play poker as, if you're a gambler, if you're a gambling addict, then you're going to play it in a very, very different way to someone who isn't a gambling addict, who is a good poker player. Right. And the gambling addict will be taken advantage of by that player who's got more skill than they have and is able to, approach the game in a more strategic way rather than as a gambler.
Which is more emotional. Right.
Exactly. So I think there are products where gambling harm can arise from them,
right,
but aren't necessarily gambling if you approach them in a different way. So I think I kind of agree with you there.
And what is that? Is it lights and shiny things like, Candy Crush? Or is it like, I mean, I went to the casino and it was like ADHD. It's like candy store, fairground. I was getting excited looking at all the lights, right? So is it that? Is it is it how they advertise? Is it strategies they use on these apps to kind of keep you captivated in the app?
Yeah, there's lots of things. I mean, you might have noticed in Vegas, the carpet is quite hideous, and that's intentional. So your eyes are averted from the carpet, and you look up at the machines and the tables. There's all sorts of techniques. There's the oxygen. There's the lack of the oxygen they pump in. The lack of clocks and knowing what time it is. You can really kind of lose yourself on the casino floor. It's very, very difficult to find the exit. There's lots of ways that they want to keep you in the premises. And this has really been exacerbated. These techniques have been exacerbated by online gambling. So online gambling companies now will do everything they can to drive engagement. And the most addictive product on online gambling companies provide is online slots. And about half of people that engage with online slots are either addicted or at risk. And you're 6 times more likely to be addicted to gambling if you gamble with online slots than if you don't. Right. So it's very, very harmful. Wow. And everything in the industry is sort of geared towards getting people onto that product. And you're talking about, a 5 to 10% house advantage. So over time, you're going to lose a lot of money. Yeah. But yeah, it's the game design that keeps you hooked. It's the lights, it's the sounds, it's everything that is there to drive engagement. And then at the same time, if you stop playing, they'll give you free spins, they'll give you bonuses.
Yeah, they don't want you to stop, right? Because they know the edge is theirs over time.
Exactly, and they want to keep you on that product. So it's a bit like it's operant conditioning. So people now understand gambling addiction a bit differently. Like some people say, it's more of like a learned behavior. So it's a habit that's formed, and that's through conditioning. So the more you engage with a product, the more you're likely to get addicted to it over time. And if that product is inherently got a house edge and it's harming, then it's going to harm you financially, right? So, so you mentioned about where gambling harm can arise. All of these other products now, Candy Crush or games like that, social casinos, mobile games, loot boxes, all of these are using gambling mechanics. Yeah. Even X and social media, Instagram, they all use similar mechanics to try to keep you hooked. I mean, if you scrolling through X and you're pulling down the news feed and that's like a slot machine. It's the same sort of aesthetics.
Yeah. So where does I guess the biggest cause from going to having a bit of fun to going into an addiction has got to be, one of the biggest things is taking a big loss when you try it out.
Yeah.
Because that's got to be the thing. I mean, but then you took a big win, right?
Yeah.
So I can see how having a big loss, then you go, oh crap, I've got to make this back. I've got to make this back. I've got to not tell my wife, my husband, my kids. I've got to actually try and get this back. So then you get into this kind of cycle, right? Or you have a big win and you think you're cocky, and then you think, oh, I'll have another go, and then you lose. So it's still a big loss, isn't it? Because you lose it again, and then it's like, oh, why did I do that? I could have. Right, okay. So it's big losses that ultimately cause an addiction, right?
I'd say so. I think that if you have a big win prior to that, then you're going to be able to convince yourself that you can win it back. I think it's easier to convince yourself if you've had experience of a big win.
Until you lose, because the odds are stacked way against you.
Yeah, it's inevitable that will happen.
Yeah.
But I think that the problem we have at the moment with some of these products now is they're extremely addictive and accessible. Gambling, online gambling, it's the first generation ever where we're carrying slot machines around in our pockets on devices we have to have to function in society.
I hate that, by the way.
Yeah, it's terrible. And there's no escape from that. And if you develop a problem with gambling, you're basically carrying a casino in your pocket, which is why Gamban, I think, is one of the things that can really help. But there's so many other platforms now that I'd say that replicate that disalignment in interests between the platform and the individual and the consumer. So the gambling is an adversarial relationship between the gambling company and the consumer, right? The gambling company is trying to get as much money as it can from you. But then you see that replicated in so many other areas now. So like leverage trading platforms, they want you to gamble. They want you to overtrade. Yeah. Frictionless trading platforms the same. They want you to engage. They want you to change your position constantly, right? Dating apps, they don't want you to find a partner. They want you to stay on the app,
of course,
and pay and do all the other stuff.
And people always say, "I never have luck with these dating apps."
That's by design. So so I think there's so much here where the gambling industry is almost like this test lab for all of these techniques to keep you engaged with something that in the long term is not in your interest.
Yeah. I see this, and I've watched documentaries on it, and I see how social media platforms are basically taking research from gambling companies and using that to make things addictive, which is awful. It's awful, but I can also see why they're trying to do it. But there's now where's the crossover? Because I mentioned Candy Crush. What point does it go from a game to an addiction of gambling? Because the gaming industry has been around for years, and Call of Duty, you now get all these in-app gaming, and gaming, that's fine. That community, they love gaming, but now they're spending so much money on upgrades and coins and bonuses, and that Candy Crush thing, there's in-app ads, and you buy more coins and all this kind of stuff, right? And that's becoming addictive. So where, have you seen games become risk of FCA, gambling? There seems to be a really grey area between it all now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the gambling harm can arise from things even that you can't win money on. I think that there's a similar sort of harm that arises from engaging with these types of games, with Candy Crush, with mobile games. Because
you're still spending money.
Exactly.
Social media, you're not necessarily spending money, but them games, you are actually buying things in the game.
Yeah, and you don't know sometimes what you're buying. It's a gamble. If it's a loot box, you might get something valuable, and that's valuable in the context of a game, but it's still valuable, so therefore it is a gamble.
Yeah.
So I think that the way that we define gambling in the legislation as a wager for money or money's worth is a bit outdated, because just because you can't cash in something that you win in a loot box doesn't mean it's not valuable. And the mobile gaming industry has this phrase, hook, habit, hobby.
Mm-hmm.
So they try to hook you in with the ads, and very often the ads are misleading about the game content. They then try to develop habitual use of that platform, of the product, to the point where you can then justify to yourself the amount of time you're spending on it, that this is a hobby, and therefore I can spend more money on it because it's like a hobby. Hey, it's like going out for dinner or something, or whatever you want to do, or play golf.
Yeah.
I'm spending money on this thing that's perhaps completely in excess of what is reasonable, what I would have thought to be reasonable, but I'm justifying it to myself.
The difference between when I was a kid and now, though, is gaming used to be, you put on a Sega Mega Drive, your friends come into your bedroom or living room, and you split screen and you play, and that's it. And then online gaming was kind of the same, but now every kid has got a casino in their pocket. And yes, you might have to be 18 to buy things, right? But there's kids asking their parents, can I buy the coins and the thing, right? So it's, yes, you can say no after a limit, and you say, look, I bought my kids this much, but I control the credit card, but they're still developing the habit and the addiction to it, right?
Yeah.
Which wasn't a thing when I was a kid.
No.
So is there an increase in younger gambling? Like what's the stats?
So the number of people, the number of 18-year-olds, quantity, proportion that download gambling apps as soon as they turn 18 every year increases year on year.
Right.
So the 1 in 10 18 to 24-year-olds are addicted to gambling or at risk. And that's in the recent gambling survey of Great Britain that came out a couple of weeks ago. So it's a big, big problem among young people. We're not fully developed in terms of our ability to gauge risk until we're 25. The prefrontal cortex doesn't develop properly till you're 25. So when you start gambling when you're young, as I did, you're much more likely to get addicted. And then you couple that with more addictive products that have been refined for engagement. You couple that with accessibility on a smartphone. It's a recipe for disaster. And I think the real issue at the moment as well is young people growing up in a world where they're constantly spoon-fed this idea that everything is fucked. The world is collapsing, and nothing's going to work for them. And if you have that culture of like feeling despondent, then it lends itself to this like, I might as well have a go. I might as well have a gamble.
Things that are going to make it fun, and your time that you've got here. You know? Even my kids have come down and said that before, and I say, look, stop listening to that is not the truth. Don't worry about anything that you can't control, and understand that you're fed information that just is what you want to hear, or there's an agenda behind everything you see, and what you're seeing your friends might not be seeing because they've got different beliefs, so they're seeing something else. And it is a crazy world we live in, and managing that alone without the additional gambling issue is just it's a nightmare. It is a nightmare. I know you're doing great work with Gamban. It's one of the main reasons that I wanted to talk to you, mate. It really, really struck a chord with what you was doing there. Before I talk about that specifically, what are some of the ramifications or the worst cases of what you see gambling lead to? Like, what are the common things? I mean, I know people are becoming depressed and losing their houses and losing their marriages, and even taking their own lives, which is tragic. But what do you see happening?
I see people's descent into addiction becoming more and more rapid over time.
Right.
I think in the past,
it's speeding up between dabbling to addiction. That gap's being narrowed.
Exactly.
Right.
And the gambling industry derives about 86% of its revenues from 5% of people that are either addicted or at risk. So you've got this commercial model that relies on people losing more than they can afford. And those people will eventually lose all the money they have and have access to, and self-exclude and seek treatment and quit. So they need to constantly replace those people. Mm-hmm. And that either means turning some of the 95% into the 5% or recruiting new gamblers. So I'm just seeing the demographic get younger and younger. I'm seeing, I mean, there's a charity, Gambling with Lives, which works with bereaved families from people who have taken their lives as a result of gambling. And it's pretty harrowing, some of the stuff that I've heard. Some of the gambling industry's tactics have been appalling, and it's just heartless industry. And, you know, I've been very keen on reforming the regulation of the industry. The industry exists, it's always going to exist. And unless it's given very, very clear guardrails, then it will take advantage of people. And that's what's been happening. And of course, you know, we have to, as people who get addicted to gambling, if that happens to us, we have to take responsibility for our recovery and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, there is a, as I say, it's by design. The industry is very much a participant, an active participant in bringing that about. And, you know, if you've got a situation where someone is on a live chat with a gambling operator customer care team and saying, I want to kill myself, and they're saying, here's a bonus, you know, that's the level it gets to.
Wow.
So I think a lot of work has been done, you know, a lot of progress has been made in like trying to reform the industry and how it's regulated. But we're still seeing, you know, record numbers of people trying to seek treatment. We're seeing, you know, month-on-month growth in people needing Gamban, in people signing up to the self-exclusion scheme, GamStop. There's almost 500,000 people on that self-exclusion register in Britain, wow. And that's just for online gambling. So it's a big, big problem.
Yeah. So if it was down to you, would you ban gambling as an entertainment altogether?
I wouldn't. I think generally, philosophically, things are better legal and regulated. I'd extend that to, you know, recreational drugs even. But the public policy objective should be to drive down harmful consumption. Right. It shouldn't be to expand. Like, we've got the worst of all worlds at the moment, where an industry is sort of promoted as a harmless entertainment activity, but not regulated as a mass consumption product. It's regulated, you know, very, very in a very light touch way. So I think if we want everyone to be able to gamble and gamble safely and enjoy themselves, it should be regulated in a very different way than it is regulated now. I've
been thinking about this a lot since you was going to come on this show. I've really been thinking about this a lot, and I don't know if there is anyone that just has fun gambling, because you either don't like it. Like when I speak to people, it's like, because for me, Vegas isn't my thing, right? And the reason is I don't want to go and put money into fruit machine. I don't want to have fun losing money. Like it's just so. And everyone I've met, they're either into it or not into it, and I don't know if there is a level at which you can have fun gambling, or even if there is anyone that does that. Like, I've never seen anyone do that.
Yeah, the gambling industry likes to say that 22 million people gamble in Britain, but that includes the lottery. Right, and that also includes like a bet on the Grand National, or like maybe the odd tournament that you want to bet on England or something. So it's not the frequent gamblers that they're talking about. The frequent gamblers is much, much less. And the proportion of those that are addicted is much higher.
Yeah. But it's just the same as, like, I think when I was saying I've been thinking about this a lot, it's about like the same as alcohol. Like, people always convince themselves that they're not an alcoholic, but they like, well, I only drink 3 times a week. I only drink like, you know, and you think, well, okay, but could you not drink? And they're like, well, no, why would you not drink? And I tell people I don't drink, and they're like, why? You know, what made you? And it's like, I'm the weird one, like, for not drinking. But it's the same thing. I've never seen anyone who's like, oh yeah, I dabble in gambling. You know, I've never met anyone like that personally. So I believe that I don't know if it can be regulated to a point where there's a healthy. I don't know. You know,
exactly. That's it. That's the balance that needs to be struck. Can you regulate it to the point where it's safe but also appealing enough to people? Like, if you can't appeal to like a broader cross section of people than people who are addicted to gambling, then that says a lot about the product that you're offering.
Yeah.
If it is only geared towards people who are losing more than they can afford, then that's clearly the problem with the product.
Yeah. So this is the polar extremes we're talking about, right? You've got Gamban, which for people who don't know, it is an app that you install on your phone, and it will ban all of the gambling apps and access to all the gambling online.
And it's designed to be as difficult to remove as possible.
Difficult to remove as possible, right? Which is obviously key, because when you're thinking about your ideal client for that app, first thing they're going to go is, I'm paying for this every month. I want to just have a little dab. I want to cancel this, turn this off, and just have another little go. That's a key thing to make it really difficult to disable, right?
So what tends to happen is people will have a session of gambling where they'll lose a lot of money, perhaps all the money they have access to in that particular moment, and they'll say, I'm never doing this again. And they'll want to not do it again. And because it's very difficult, as I mentioned before, like with addiction, it's like telling you that it's a good idea to gamble.
Yeah.
And then if you've lost loads of money, then you can't win that. The addiction can't win that argument, right? You're like, hang on, no, this is bad. I'm never going to do this again. And in that moment, then people will self-exclude and they'll download Gamban. And then when they get the urge to gamble, it's too difficult for them.
Yeah.
And then that helps them, in that moment they want to get treatment.
Right. So your client is the person that knows they've got a problem.
Yes.
They are willing to invest their money in helping them stop, because they know there's a problem, right? So you are just saying, cancel gambling altogether, right? So it's almost like it's a reactive app to a problem that's already there.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't prevent it.
No. So in the meantime, you're trying to get people to, or the government or these gambling companies, to change the way that they, change regulations towards gambling and change these things like shiny lights and all this kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
Which I just think there's stakeholders of all these companies. They've got to answer to these people to make money. I really, really am passionate about this, mate, and I really want to. I'm fully behind Gamban, and I would do everything I can to like push this product. But I think it's just going to be a battle of heads until one or the other. It's going to be a fight to the death. I can't see there being a happy resolution. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you've framed it in that way, because it's like, I would like a world in which people didn't need Gamban, or they didn't need it as much, right? So I spend a lot of time campaigning for reforms that will reduce gambling harm. And we've been relatively successful recently. We've managed to get the government to agree to stake limits on online slots. Yep. So £2 a spin for under 25s, £5 for over 25s. Not perfect, but it's definitely better than no stake limits, which is what it is at the moment.
Which is basically like leverage in trading, where they're offering like 50 to 1, 100 to 1 leverage, which they've also come down on, so. Yeah,
exactly. Affordability checks for people who are losing a lot, to, put the responsibility on the operator to make sure that the money that they're taking from an individual is money they can afford to lose. There's things like a statutory levy that's going to come in, that's going to fund independent research, treatment for addicts. It's going to raise about 100 million a year, which is very, very important, I think, for future policy, evidence-based policies. And I think that the regulator's going to have more resources. I'm hoping that things move from now much more smoothly in terms of reform. But you're right, it is extremely difficult. And it's extremely difficult to, the industry has not embraced reform as you would expect. Yeah. It's very integral to their commercial model. The fact that people are harmed by their product. It's going to take a long time for them to reset that commercial model. But I'm a utopian to some extent. I do think that it's possible to get the industry to a place where fewer people are harmed, where they have longer term relationships with their customers. Mm-hmm. And if that means that they have to lose, some of the products that they offer, then that's a price worth paying.
Yeah. So the work that I do is proactively educating people against just don't use them in the first place.
Yeah, well, I think that's
right. You don't want to lose your money. You want to build wealth.
Yeah. So I agree, and I think that's where the industry will end up if it's not careful. I think that there will be more and more people who, like yourself, who advocate for not participating at all.
Yeah.
So if the industry wants to come up against campaigns that try to drive down consumption because the product is not seen as safe, because it's not, there's a high risk of addiction, then they're going the right way about it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also a very dangerous place for the industry to be in. And also you've got this kind of pincer movement between the baby boomers and Gen Z.
Yeah. Yeah.
The baby boomers don't like online gambling. They don't understand why it's allowed. Like, they're really anti it. And they're the biggest demographic. And Gen Z, who don't want to give their money to harmful consumption sectors. So if you don't win that generation, then you're going to, you're creating problems for the future.
Right. Yeah. So what about the educational side of enforcing that into these companies as well? Because like smoking's making big moves. We've seen the harm on the packets and the disgusting photos, the price increase. Now they've just said that anyone born after 2009 will never be able to buy them. And arguably there's stupid vapes and things like that now, but they seem to be making moves. Whereas on a gambling app, where's the education from the company saying this will lose all your money? It's some little pop-up thing that's tiny small print, or is that something that could be improved?
Definitely. I'd like to see more education in schools about the gambling industry, about the tactics they use, like tobacco style education that we had, where they say, here's how they try to get you addicted, here are the tactics they use in marketing, here's why nicotine is addictive, this is what they did for years and years to cover up that it was addictive and caused cancer. Actual, what I call commercial determinants of harm. So what the industry is doing to try to get you to do something that's not in your interest. And that can really, I think, help people make informed decisions about whether they want to engage with something.
Yeah.
At the moment, we don't really have that. We have an education, if we have any at all, that is more sort of gamble responsibly. It's not really talking about what the industry's doing.
With Gamban, as a company, you're the co-founder of Gamban. One of the challenges you must have had is how to make the cancellation difficult, because you can't just keep taking people's money without their consent, right? So in my head, it's like the best thing to do is, in order to cancel this, you have to ring us up in office hours to cancel, but I don't even know if that's legal. Like, how did you handle that? Like, what is that process?
So we offer various different durations of protection.
Right.
The shortest subscription is a month, but we'll always try to encourage people to take out longer durations in that moment they want to quit. And the protection will last for as long as the subscription, the duration. So if you cancel the subscription, say 2 weeks into a month, then the protection will last for the rest of that month. What we don't want to do is, if people have taken a decision to block gambling on their devices and have installed the protection, is if they come to us and say, I need to get this off my devices. Well, you can cancel your subscription and the subscription will lapse. But what tends to happen is if we say we're not prepared to remove it, they'll then recontact us subsequent to that and say, thanks very much for not letting me remove it. Because I was having a moment where I had an urge to gamble.
Amazing. And is there a side of Gamban that kind of connects with those types of people who contact you, like to work with them and say, oh, they're great, let's help you or support you?
So we have a customer support team, and we have very good relationships with helplines in different jurisdictions. So gambling support helplines. So in Britain, GamCare, in the Netherlands, where we just started working, Locket Canspel, which is the gambling helpline. So we'll definitely signpost people to those services. But the important thing from our perspective is that we have very, very clear rules about if someone, in the context that someone wants to remove Gamban, when we would permit that. Because I think the whole point of doing it, the whole point of our product is that people don't want to have that opportunity.
Amazing.
They want to take that. They want to take that freedom away from themselves.
Yeah. I love it. I wish I could help more with the educational side of it, and bring awareness to it. In fact, I'd love Gamban to be the official sponsor of this show without paying a penny.
Oh well, yeah, we can definitely talk about that. Yeah,
Right. You know,
awesome.
I mean, that's kind of how important this is, and I would love to share the message and help Gamban do as well as I can help it do, you know, as well.
That's awesome. Thank you so much,
Mate, it's been a great chat. Before we just head off, just tell everyone who's listening where they can actually find you. You know, what's the interactions with Gamban? Because I know I've had people who have gone into trading and then developed an addiction into gambling. I've had people who have gone into trading. Their wife has been monitoring their behavior and watching them, and then their wife got addicted to gambling apps. You know, and that was a true story. And they're still together. They worked for it, but it was like 30 grand of debt in gambling. So there is kind of, it's not just direct. There's indirect consequences as well. That's what I've seen.
definitely.
So yeah, where can people find you?
I think just very quickly. I mean, you touched on it earlier about the overlap between gambling and other products, and we took the decision at Gamban to block leverage trading platforms because people get people who are addicted to gambling. I think that can, you know, cause a lot of problems for them. We took the decision to block crypto. We want to maintain, obviously, people's access to investing, but I think that it's really important, and programs like yours are very important because it's about finding that distinction between the platforms that are basically gambling and the platforms that are like conducive to long-term investing that is actually going to be in your interest. So yeah, we make those judgment calls when we see different platforms. If you want to find me, I'm on X at Matt Zarb. My Gamban is gamban.com. It's free in the UK through talkbanstop.com, and that's funded by GambleAware. And that's a partnership between Gamban, GamStop, and GamCare. And if you are experiencing harm from gambling, or you know someone who is, then I'd recommend going to GamFam, which is a charity that helps affected others, and also GamLearn, which is a charity that tries to educate people in recovery on why they've become addicted. These are all very, very good, like, peer support networks. And of course, Gambling with Lives, which I mentioned. If you know someone who's been affected by gambling and has taken their own lives, I think that they're doing fantastic work. So yeah, my campaign is Clean Up Gambling. So this is a lot of plugs.
All the links will be in the description.
Yeah, I appreciate it. My campaign is Clean Up Gambling, and we were involved with the recent government white paper on gambling reform, and yeah, we got quite a few things over the line. But yeah, no, thank you very, very much for the chat. It's been great.
Yeah, amazing. Just one last thing. Going back to when you was 25, people watching this, they've now got a question in their head. Well, do I have a problem with it? You know, is this healthy? What are the warning signs? What would you say to anyone who's maybe tinkering on the edge of that potential dangerous territory? How they know that they've got a problem? What are the telltale signs? You know, what can they do about it?
Yeah, I think looking back, I knew I had a problem when I was just thinking about gambling when I wasn't gambling, thinking about my next bet.
Right.
If I was thinking about winning back losses and had a kind of, you know, a compulsion to do that, and started to like lose enjoyment in other things. Right. Lose enjoyment in and any couldn't really derive pleasure from any other activities. Yeah, that's the only thing I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I think if you're in that mindset, that's, you know, pretty harmful. But I think as well, like, the important thing to recognize is you are addicted. If you are addicted, then you are never going to win. Yeah. You will no session win will ever be enough. You'll always chase more. And if you lose money, then you're always going to chase the losses. So the only way to get out of that cycle is to quit.
Yeah. Just mirroring what I've said so many times on this channel. If they are in that position, is there anyone that they could talk to reaffirm that they do have a little bit of an issue? Like, who do they reach out to in the first port of call?
I would reach out to the National Gambling Helpline, which is run by GamCare. I would also, there's lots of information on the Gamban app as well about addiction.
Right. Amazing.
And there's also lots of NHS clinics that specialize in gambling addiction treatment now as well. So you can get referred, you can refer yourself to them, you can get referred by your GP. So there's lots of support out there. So it's important that people recognize that this is taken very, very seriously now. It's a proper addiction. Just because it's not a substance doesn't mean the same things aren't happening in your brain as if you were addicted to a substance.
Yeah, amazing. Well, look, guys, I hope you got value from that. Look, I know there's some people who listen to this who might be in that position. As I say, I've had clients that have had that problem. We're here to help you live a life that you want to live. We've got to build wealth, not lose it, not depreciate it, not dissolve it. We want to live a free and financially stable life. Gambling is not something that's going to help with that. So let's all win together. Go and check out Matt's stuff. All the links are below. And until next time, thanks, Matt, for coming on again.
Thanks so much.
We'll see you next week.